Week 6 is just finished up, and that means it's time to hit your Dynasty waiver wires and see if there are players that could be valuable to you and your roster by either selling them off or actually contribute to your starting lineup. So let's get right into the video. As I say every week, I pull real data from real rosters from actual Dynasty leagues run through safe leagues on myfantasyleague.com, which helps guide me and directs me to players that could actually be available in all of y'all's Dynasty leagues out there as well. So all and any data and roster percentages that I mention are from that data source. So let me first give you a couple of players that are probably rostered in your Dynasty leagues right now, but are not at 100% rostership from the 600 plus safe leagues that I am pulling from. And that includes Geno Smith, specifically in Superflex leagues. Cordarrelle Patterson. Guys, pick up Cordarrelle Patterson if he is on your waiver wire. I don't know why he's still not at 100%. So pick him up if he's still out there. Double check. Devontae Booker, running back for the New York Giants. Donovan Peoples-Jones, wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns, and Ricky Seals-Jones, tight end for the Washington football team. Like I said, these guys are probably already rostered, but double check just to be sure because these guys are not at 100% rostership. And if they are sitting on your waiver wire, you need to immediately pick them up. So let's get right into it because we have a couple names that are really big priority waiver wire ads this week, I think, and a bunch of other guys who could just kind of be there that if you need a guy, you can pick up. But the first initial name, and actually first two initial names that I want to throw out as waiver wire ads this week are both of the backup running backs for the Cleveland Browns, and that is Demetric Felton and D'Ernest Johnson. To me, it's anyone's guess as to who the better pickup between these two guys is going to be. Demetric Felton is actually more rostered than D'Ernest Johnson, so it's entirely possible that Johnson is the one that's available in your Dynasty leagues and not Demetric Felton, who might already be rostered. But if they're both available for you, I think both of them are a quality pickup, and you could put in a waiver wire bid on both of those guys and just see how the cards fall and see which way the ball bounces on either one of these two guys if Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt both continue to sit out. I mean, Nick Chubb obviously missed this week because of a calf injury. Kareem Hunt got the lion's share of the workload as we expected, but then he too was carted off the field with a calf injury that looked a lot worse, that we thought was an Achilles, but that Kevin Stefanski came out and said was not and was actually just a calf injury. But it seems like he's going to be out for at least this week, if not, potentially the entire rest of the year, because that injury looked really, really bad. But I am curious to see who the main guy would be between D'Ernest Johnson and Demetric Felton if Nick Chubb does miss as well. In this past game against Arizona, both Felton and Johnson received one touch each. Now, Felton was the receiving touch and Johnson was the rushing touch, so that's kind of an interesting breakdown there, especially given the fact that Demetric Felton has almost exclusively been used as a receiving back, and D'Ernest Johnson last year when Nick Chubb missed time was the 1 and 2 down back with Kareem Hunt maintaining his role. So that could be something that we could look at with D'Ernest Johnson being more of the Nick Chubb guy and Demetric Felton being more of the Kareem Hunt guy. If both of those two guys sit and then now these two guys kind of take over for each of their individual roles as well in a new Browns offense. If it were me, I would be personally picking D'Ernest Johnson, not just because he's more widely available for everybody to pick up, but also because I believe that he could be the main guy to get the first and second down workload with a little bit of the receiving workload sprinkled in. I think he could lead the snaps in running backs. I think he just overall, he would be the guy over Demetric Felton, but Felton is also interesting because he would have the PPR and receiving upside as well, and could be a guy that could be like a Chase Edmonds to D'Ernest Johnson's James Conner, and just that's how the backfield is split. But I would be going after D'Ernest Johnson if you need that spot start, and because he is also more widely available. One other running back I want to quickly touch on right now is Elijhaa Penny, running back for the New York Giants. I know I mentioned at the beginning to automatically pick up Devontae Booker if he is still available in your leagues. And Elijhaa Penny is widely available. He's actually rostered in 0% of the Dynasty leagues that I'm looking at. And Elijhaa Penny is interesting to me because he is now the backup to Devontae Booker, who was the backup to Saquon Barkley. So you're handcuffing the handcuff to the starter. But Elijhaa Penny to me is interesting because he's very widely available. Nobody's probably going to really prioritize him or even pick him up this week, even though he did get the goal line touchdown at the end of the game in garbage time. But nobody's really going to prioritize Elijhaa Penny, and they're just going to kind of chalk it up to whatever. Devontae Booker's the guy. But if Devontae Booker were to get hurt, and there's still a little bit of overlap between Devontae Booker missing time and Saquon Barkley still missing time, the new backfield now, in my opinion, would belong to Elijhaa Penny, because this Giants team and Jason Garrett specifically have shown us through both Saquon Barkley and now Devonta Freeman that they really only want one guy maintaining the lion's share of the workload in that backfield. So if anything were to happen to Devontae Booker, then I think Elijhaa Penny would slot right into that role, because he was the only other running back this week to receive touches behind Devontae Booker. So that gives me faith that he would go right into that workload and right into that role if Devontae Booker were to sit. So if you have room on your roster and you have a deeper roster in a deeper league and you just have the space available, maybe you have a guy that you can just move to the IR, or you just drop some other guy, or maybe you've been sitting on one empty roster space this whole entire time, I think Elijhaa Penny is a pretty solid stash that you can get for probably completely free this entire week. Then there are two other guys that I want to mention, both of them wide receivers, and both of them I think are in interesting spots right now. And the first one is Dante Pettis, the wide receiver for the New York Giants, and the second one is Jamal Agnew, wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And both are kind of interesting to me because they saw a pretty significant target share in this past week, and in Jamal Agnew's instance, in case he's actually seen it over the past 2 weeks. So sticking with Jamal Agnew, he's seen 7 and 6 targets over the past 2 weeks. He's had double-digit PPR points in the last 2 weeks, and has overall just run a lot of routes, a lot of snaps ever since DJ Chark has gone down. Now, it's really tough to predict this whole entire Jaguars passing offense, especially because Urban Meyer seems so set in the fact that he wants Trevor Lawrence and James Robinson to like equal out in their opportunities and have a complete 50-50 run pass split, which is really maddening, especially given the fact that the Jaguars are going to have to throw more than they are going to run just to be able to stay in games. And Trevor Lawrence is going to have to throw a lot like he did this past week. And not to mention the fact that we have other receiving options that we love on the Jacksonville Jaguars, like Laviska Shenault and Marvin Jones. So seeing them not get targets in favor of Jamal Agnew and Dan Arnold is really frustrating to a lot of people out there. But it's been 2 weeks now, and Jamal Agnew has seen, like I said, 13 total targets over the last 2 weeks. So it's really interesting, and I think that he is somebody who you could just start if you really, really need to, kind of like a Hunter Renfrow or somebody that could just potentially fall into the end zone. But then moving back to Dante Pettis, what was really interesting about him was that he was actually the main guy after Kadarius Toney went down with injury at the beginning of the game in the first quarter this week. And that turned into 11 targets for Dante Pettis, with Sterling Shepard as the only 2 wide receiving options on this team, with also Colin Johnson, Evan Ingram, and then the couple targets that Devontae Booker got. But it was primarily this week Sterling Shepard and Dante Pettis once Kadarius Toney got hurt and did not return to the game. Now, Pettis wasn't all that great or efficient with his 11 targets. He only had 5 receptions for 48 yards as his final stat line, but the target share was very notable to me, and that could be something that I want to, continue to check on and see how Kadarius Toney is progressing with his injury. Not to mention that Kenny Galladay's also been sitting as well, and Sterling Shepard has also not been the perfect bill of health over the past couple of years, and even this year as well, just coming back this week and seeing a massive target share. So could Dante Pettis, the nice blast from the past, be a guy who's even more necessary, like all these Giants players that I've recommended over the past couple of weeks, just being extremely necessary for this New York Giants offense, and especially a team that we know is going to have to throw the ball a lot, and that it could in turn just turn into another solid wide receiver that you can start in a bye week, in a pinch, especially this week as the bye-apocalypse is hitting us. The last guy I want to mention is kind of similar to Elijhaa Penny in that it is a backup that if you could grab right now, you could beat the waiver wire if things go a certain way. And that one to me is Durham Smythe, the tight end for the Miami Dolphins, who is super interesting to me as a guy that you could stash now before anything were to happen and beat the waiver wire, beat the rest of your league mates to a guy who could see a lot more value and more volume in the coming weeks if something were to happen to Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki has been absolutely fantastic for fantasy. His target share has been fantastic. He's been a top 7 tight end in each of the last 4 weeks. And if anything were to happen to him, I think that Durham Smythe would be the guy that would go right into that workload and see a value rise and a volume rise that could be really solid for fantasy and make him a viable play at the tight end position. This is something that we've seen before. We're already seeing it right now with Ricky Seals-Jones, with Logan Thomas out. We've seen it before with the Tennessee Titans. When Jonnu Smith was out, Anthony Ferkser had a really solid uptick in targets and potential volume and was a really solid PPR play. So I think that Durham Smythe could just be another guy like that in an offense that we have seen be so dependent on the tight end position that Durham Smythe could see a value increase if anything were to happen to Mike Gesicki. Now, of course, that depends on something happening to Mike Gesicki, but if you have the room, if you have the roster space, and maybe you have some other tight ends that you're not really, ever going to play, or you just might be waiting on for something to happen for them, I think Durham Smythe is another guy that you can just throw into the back of your rotation, just, continue to churn out the back end of your roster and see if something happens with some of these guys. And I really like picking up Durham Smythe this week, especially after his 5 for 59 that he already had this week and could potentially become even more necessary in this Dolphins offense. Like I said, if anything happened to Mike Gesicki. As I mentioned every week, I do drop a waiver wire article on dynastyleaguefootball.com that does cover more players than what I covered in this video right now, and also drops a day earlier on Monday. So if you want access to that article, as well as all the other amazing articles, tools, ADP, and all the other stuff that we're doing over at dynastyleaguefootball.com, you can become a DLF Premium subscriber and gain access to a whole bunch of awesome content to help you guys win some Dynasty championships. And if you'd like to see an extensive recap of what happened in week 6, game by game, and all the observations and stuff that we have learned for Dynasty and the impacts on Dynasty from every game this week, you can click right up here and watch that video. And with that all being said, guys, thank you all so much for watching. We'll catch y'all later.